Tonight's story begins with a move to a picture-perfect, town-friendly neighbors, perfect schools, and a company that seems too good to be true. But when the crickets fall silent, when the Harvest Festival serves food with secrets inside, and when your family starts to smile just a little too wide, you realize why nobody ever leaves Glimmer Vale. Because, in this town, the neighbors aren't human anymore. Welcome to Nightmare Proof, where true horror comes alive. Here, you'll hear real stories of the strange, the disturbing, and the unexplainable. Turn down the lights, get comfortable, and prepare to face the darkness. I moved my family into a picture-perfect small town. Now I know why nobody ever leaves. When I accepted the job as a product lifecycle analyst in Glimmer Vale County, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I hadn't even heard of Nilotech before I saw the posting, but the deeper I looked, the more it felt like a gold mine. Paid relocation for my whole family. A remote role, with only 1 or 2 mandatory days in the office each month. Their headquarters sat right in the center of Glimmer Vale, the city the county was named after, and as long as I lived within a 35-minute commute, I was good. And Nilotech wasn't just some fly-by-night startup either. They were a government contractor, growing year after year, with one of the best employee retention rates in the industry. Everything about the offer screamed stability. The relocation stipend was generous too. Generous enough that we could move into Dunson Township, a wealthy little enclave tucked into the northeast hills of the county. It was everything the brochures promised. One of the best school systems in the state, pristine colonial-style homes, seasonal festivals, and a well-known annual celebration called the Harvest Festival, which happened every October at their community center. It was beautiful. Hallmark, really. The house we found looked like something out of a magazine, spread. The entirety of the neighborhood seemed friendly, polite, and welcoming. Except for one, of course. Our neighbor. Something about him was wrong. If not wrong, unnatural. The first time we encountered him was the night we moved in. By the time we pulled onto Hopper Street, the kids had been out cold for hours. Julia and I just sat there for a moment in the driveway, headlights washing over our new house, our fresh start. No more city smog, no more sirens, no more factories. Just the Appalachians. A sky full of stars, the moon casting its pale light over the neighborhood like a filter. The street didn't even have proper lamps, but the glow was enough. The outlines of the trees and hills were more beautiful than the colors themselves, like we'd stepped into a postcard. When we opened the car doors, it felt like entering another world. The night air hit first. Cool, sharp, clean in a way that burned the nose. Nature's version of a reset button. Crickets chirped in waves. Small animals shuffled in the brush across the street. And for the first time in 13 hours of driving, I didn't feel suffocated. Julia shepherded the kids inside, while I started hauling overnight bags and a cooler from the back. I must have only been outside 20 minutes, maybe less, when I heard it, the suction hiss of a door opening, followed by the creak of a screen door. And then, everything stopped. Not just the rustling in the bushes, the crickets too, gone. Silence hit me like freight. You know how they say when everything's quiet, it means a predator's close? That's exactly what it felt like. Not goosebumps yet, but that chill prickle under the skin that precedes them, the sixth sense that eyes are on you. I froze in the driveway, cooler clutched to my chest, staring at a yard I hadn't even noticed until now. No porch light, just a figure in the doorway, half hidden by the glare of my headlights. A faint flicker from inside, probably a TV, outlined him in a wavering glow. I managed, aiming for casual, but landing somewhere between shaky and awkward. Hey, lovely morning we're having. I'm your new neighbor, Clint. Nothing except what appeared to be the silhouette of his head turning to face me. I tried again. I see you're an early bird too. What I got back wasn't words, just a grunt. Then, the heavy thud of a door closing, followed by the snap of the screen door smacking shut. And the second it did, the cricket started up again, like nothing had happened. I stood there a beat, cooler in hand, feeling like I'd already failed some kind of test. Then I went back to unloading, killed the headlights, and locked up. Julia and I whispered about the week's plans, and before long we were out cold, lulled to sleep by the steady drone of insects chirping through the cracked window. Still, as Julia drifted off, I couldn't shake the awkward thought. Our first impression hadn't gone so great. The morning came too early. Well, morning is generous. We'd pulled in at 2 a.m., but kids don't care about details. Jackson, 6 years old and powered entirely by chaos, launched himself onto our bed at 7 a.m. sharp. Mom, Dad, come on. All our stuff's still in the car. I'm bored. I've been up forever. Come on, come on, come on. Gabby wandered in, rubbing her eyes. Jackson, I grabbed your DS last night. Before I could thank her, Jackson scrambled off the bed. My jaw clenched as his foot planted squarely in my crotch on his way off. Who needs caffeine when you've got kids? Julia and I went into full parental delegation mode. She'd start breakfast. I'd haul in the essential kitchen boxes and then work through the rest of the car, which, honestly, was fine. It gave me my first look at Hopper Street in daylight. The neighborhood was even prettier in the Sunday Grill-A-Day Oval, they called it. Dunson's big, family-friendly community. Tree-lined streets, houses tucked back just enough that you felt like you had privacy. Our place faced 3 wooded lots across the road, with more houses nestled deeper in the trees. To the left, another patch of woods. To the right, the neighbor, the man from last night. His house didn't match the rest. Not in a broken-down way, exactly. Just different. A short, waist-high picket fence ringed the yard, paint chipped and flaking. Weedy wildflowers sprouted tall in patches where everyone else's lawns looked freshly groomed. A couple pieces of siding sagged loose on the front, but the porch itself was neatly arranged. 2 stout posts in the middle of the yard held pulley joints strung with nylon wire. On the posts, lanterns dangled from metal hooks on one end of the wire. Bird feeders swayed lazily across the nylon, traveling to the porch, where the cords were tied off to metal loops attached to hooks drilled into the porch posts. If you ignored the rough edges, it was almost quaint. Idyllic even, but it didn't belong here. Not on Hopper Street, not in Dunson Township. It was outdated, looked like it clashed with HOA, and just fit more of a rural aesthetic. I told myself, maybe we'd just disturbed his peace last night. Maybe he wasn't a talk to the new guy at 2 a.m. type. I was halfway convinced when I saw the curtain reel closed in the corner of my view. He'd been watching, and now he knew I was watching back. Second impression, nailed it. Most of the weekend blurred into unpacking boxes and trying to make the place feel like home. By Sunday evening, though, we finally got a taste of the neighborhood. A group of couples stopped by with a gift basket and warm smiles. Cookies, wine, the usual welcome to the neighborhood stuff. Then, there were a few handmade candles and some pre-made herb mixes, a crafty bunch. They hung around the porch, trading restaurant recommendations and small talk. It couldn't have been more than an hour, but it felt good to put names to faces. Donna and Gerald ducked out first, then Tracy and Dan. Leah headed back to cook dinner for her kids, leaving her husband, Will, leaning on the railing with me. He sipped a beer, let a pause hang in the air, then leaned in a little. So, he asked casually, how's Curtis, man? Who? Curtis, your neighbor. Oh, he's fine, I guess. Doesn't seem like he wants much to do with us. But then again, we haven't exactly been quiet while moving in. That's not what I mean, I frowned. What do you mean? Will gave me this look. Part smirk, part warning. Curtis belongs in jail. They never proved anything, but his wife disappeared back when I was a kid. Never found her. Whole town knows the story. Guy's a psycho, doesn't talk to anyone. If I were you, I'd steer clear. I know my face must have betrayed me, because Will chuckled. Then he straightened up like he'd already decided the conversation was over. Welp, I'll see you later, man. What the fuck? You're just gonna leave me with that? He turned back, almost like an afterthought. Put a hand on my shoulder. Oh, Right, sorry. I'm sure it's safe now. Lightning doesn't strike twice. And just like that, he was gone. I stood on the porch with that line rattling in my skull, not sure if it was supposed to be a joke or the worst kind of reassurance. Either way, my skin crawled. Because when the crowd left and the last car pulled away, I realized something. The crickets were gone for the whole visit. Silence, heavy and total, just like the night we arrived. And I couldn't shake the thought. Was he out there somewhere, watching? I know how this must sound. Up until this point, nothing had really happened. Curtis scared the bugs off my property, sure. I'd even wake up at night and hear crickets inside the house, like they'd been driven to the walls. But beyond that, nothing concrete. Life was good, work was easy. Maybe 3 hours of real work a day. Jackson thrived at school, so popular we had to cap sleepovers because half the neighborhood kids wanted to camp out in our basement. Gabby had her own little circle, Sydney and Kayla, plus her first real crush on a boy named Dugan from a few streets down. She'd always asked to go walk his family's dog with him. Jules was already tight with the local moms, spending her days getting to know the town while I stayed buried in spreadsheets. We were fitting in perfectly, I'd say in a picture book-esque way. We knew everyone always likes the new people in town, but our assimilation seemed effortless. That's why what I learned at Gabby's parent-teacher conference gutted me. Mr. Parks was her pre-algebra teacher, a wiry guy with a Hollywood picture smile. I expected him to walk us through test scores and homework. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and asked, "So, you guys got that nice colonial on Hopper Street?" It was strange he knew exactly where we lived, but he explained it away quick. Dunson doesn't get too many homes for sale per year. Nobody likes to leave. I nodded, casual. Yeah, it's a nice place. Bigger than we expected. Well, he said, you must have gotten a pretty sweet deal on it. All things considered. Jules frowned. What do you mean? That's when he gave us the look, the one where you could tell he knew something we didn't. Oh, you really don't know, do you? My stomach dropped. Don't know what? He hesitated, but only for a second. The family before you went missing. He paused, almost theatrically. Or maybe they left. Hard to say. They left all their stuff though, so I assume the worst. My thoughts snapped back to our move-in ready house. The couches, the beds, all those pre-furnished perks. Mr. Parks didn't stop. I guess they don't have to disclose that kind of thing, since technically no one died in it. That's when Jules broke. Tears welled and spilled, and she huffed before purposely striding from the room. I glared at Parks, my face burning hot, but he only threw his hands up like it was some innocent slip. When I turned to follow Jules, I caught his reflection in the classroom door's window. Maybe it was just the glare, but for half a second, it looked like he was smiling. When I swung the door open, I gave one last glance back. His face was apologetic, his hands already working their way back up. Then, I turned the corner and followed my wife to the car. The ride home was short, broken only by a stop at the hardware store. Julia was adamant about making sure the house was safe, so we stocked up on new locks and deadbolts for every entrance. Even the shed at the back of the property got a new latch and a combination lock. I never told her about Curtis's wife. Didn't want to scare her. Sure, we had the relocation stipend, but not enough to just up and leave. We were locked in, financially, if not literally. And I kept telling myself, maybe Curtis was just a bitter old man. Better not to plant seeds of paranoia in her head, the seeds that gnawed at the back of my mind since we'd moved in. I had tried to speak to him prior, but I left the ball on his side of the court long ago. If he didn't want to talk to us, then let him want nothing from us. That evening, I was determined to have each new lock installed. At the time, I was grabbing the last one to take out back. The kids were leaving on a bike ride with Dugan. Curtis was out as well, tying something to his fence, when strolled by walking toward my shed. He was older than I realized, maybe late 60s. Scruffy gray beard, scalp bare as bone. He didn't look at me once as I walked to the tree line. just kept working his knots. As the evergreens swallowed him from view, the crickets swelled. Every step deeper into the yard, louder. Their endless drone had been gnawing at me for months now. At first, they'd been across the street, then around the house's perimeter. By October, it felt like at least a few of them were peddling their chirps in my house every other night. If I was upstairs, I'd hear them in the kitchen. If I was downstairs, I heard them in the basement or in the attic. I'd tried bug bombs, hired pest control. Nothing worked. I could hear them every night, but I'd never managed to rid myself of them. So, by the time I was kneeling on the shed ramp, fumbling screws in the half-dark, sweat beginning to sheen and glisten on my forehead, I was at my limit. The droning in my ears, the slick handle of the screwdriver, the sheer futility of it all. I fumbled with the buttons of my flannel and flung it into the brush with a growl of frustration. I could feel the heat of anger at the top of my skull, myself failing to focus. Eventually, the October air cooled me as I finished the final screw on the latch. The shed door shut smooth. The new lock clicked into place. One small victory. I stepped off the ramp and went to retrieve my shirt. That's when I saw it. A footpath into the woods. Grass pressed down, not from one trip, but many. Squatted spots along the way, like someone had paused, crouched, waited. So many spots. And 30 feet into the tree line, barely visible in the dusk, a trail camera. My stomach dropped. I'd fucking had it. None of my anger was about the fucking bugs. I'd been alive 38 years. I know what bugs sound like. This was different. By then, I was certain that if Curtis wasn't a serial killer, he was a creepy asshole of a neighbor. Who sets a camera up in someone else's backyard? I grabbed the strap looped around the tree, hunting for the buckle, and my frustration turned into a blunt, stupid rhythm. Pull, cuss, yank. The strap slid. I cursed louder. I slammed it back into the trunk, yanked it hard, the nylon whining in my hands. Fuck you! Fuck your stupid fucking camera! Don't fuck with me! As the strap broke, I threw the damn thing into the brush. It landed with a crash, branches snapping, leaves protesting. For a second the crunch kept going, like an echo stretching out as if a squirrel got spooked and scattered away, maybe a few. And then, nothing. Dead quiet. My anger died the second the silence hit. That uncanny stillness pressed in, heavier than the crickets ever were. I bent, picked up the busted trail cam, and stiffly scanned the trees before walking back toward the yard. Curtis was still outside. He wasn't trimming hedges anymore. He was on his back deck, filling a generator with gas. I stopped at the fence, holding the camera up. My voice came out hard, but shaky. You lose something? He glanced at me, then back at what he was doing. Hey, don't ignore me. This? Yours? Why the fuck was it pointed at my yard? This time he turned, walked up to the fence, reached out, and took the camera from my hand. For a second, his face shifted, a flash of concern, gone almost as soon as it appeared. He gave the faintest shake of his head and pressed the camera back into my palms. Then he turned away. Something in me snapped. You know you can use English, right? He didn't answer. I threw the trail cam at the edge of his garden bed. It clattered against the pavers, loud in the stillness. He glanced back once, not angry, not offended, just resigned. A face like someone bracing for something inevitable. Then he slid his glass door shut behind him and disappeared into the house. I stood there feeling like a kid who just mouthed off at the wrong adult. But I wasn't about to try and undo it. I walked back to my house. Inside, the air smelled of one of the homemade candles from the neighborhood gift basket the first week we were here. Jules greeted me with a smile, happy I'd finished locking everything down. I could hear footsteps scurrying upstairs. My mood washed slightly, happy I was with my family. I smiled back, but my hands still itched with the memory of the camera. Later that night, long after Julia and the kids had gone to bed, I caught him again. Just a silhouette in his yard, leaning on the fence line like he was standing watch. He didn't look at me, didn't wave. just faced my house and the street, still as a scarecrow, until I shut the curtains. The rest of that week, the week leading up to the Harvest Festival, passed in a blur. Despite being the first week of October, every house in town was already draped in Halloween decorations. Every house except Curtis's, of course. Gabby spent days agonizing over what she'd wear for her school's Halloween dance. Jackson, he was Batman, every single day. Julia and I barely had time for Halloween antics yet. The township committee had already roped us into volunteering for the Harvest Festival. Seemed harmless enough. Get close with the neighbors. Fit in. I signed up as an assistant games director for the kids. Julia would help in the kitchen. The festival ran 3 nights. Honestly, it wasn't as big as I'd expected, considering how heavily the township advertised it. Hardly any food trucks, barely any rides. Just a carousel, a miniature Ferris wheel, a scattering of booths. The booths were stranger than I expected too. The pumpkin patch was just a few rows of carved gourds already prepped to be thrown away, their insides showing a little rot, appearing slightly soft. And at the kids' craft table, I could swear I heard them humming in unison, a dry, rhythmic rasp I wasn't familiar with, but it was unnerving. Whenever kids do anything, and you pull it out of context, they just seem like little creeps, even my own sometimes. The first 2 days of the fest, I was swamped running games. On the last day, they stuck me in the dunk tank. Not with water either. The local winery had filled it with their signature red. You'd think that would be fun. It wasn't. The wine stained everything it touched, left me sticky, and by the end of the day, my skin was dyed and my thighs were raw. Eventually, it all wrapped up with the harvest feast. A glorified Thanksgiving dinner under a massive rental tent. Rows of folding tables, buffet lines, the whole town crammed together with paper plates and forced smiles. The food was edible. The turkey, especially. Julia leaned over and whispered that it was seasoned the same way as those neighbor spice packets we'd been gifted when we first moved in. The ones we tried once and immediately tossed. I was picking at mine when Mr. Hunt, one of the older guys, always too loud, made an offhanded comment as I asked for a thigh. "Careful," he said, grinning. "Curtis loves dark meat too." The table laughed. I didn't. For the first time, it really hit me. Maybe Curtis wasn't cold because he was a loner. Maybe he just didn't like me, didn't like us, and the thought dug into my chest. Did my neighbor just hate me because I was black? The dinner broke up early when the power went out. Grid-wide outage. Most people left. Dugan and his parents gave the kids a ride home. Julia and I stayed behind to help clean the tent for another 45 minutes, then headed out as the sky went dusky. On the drive home, my head kept drifting back to Curtis. He'd ticked every box of suspicion in the quietest, most boring ways. I kept telling myself I was paranoid, that I was the one letting other people's gossip shape my judgment. But Will's joke about his wife, Mr. Park's smug smirk, the way the town seemed to close ranks whenever Curtis was mentioned, something felt wrong. When we pulled into the driveway, the mailbox flag was up. A single blank envelope, no return address. I shrugged it off. Probably an ad, I said. I opened it out of habit. Yep, roofing company. Once inside, I set it on the island in the kitchen. Jules and I got washed up, and we watched Scream 1996 on our iPad while lounging on the living room couch. I'd shown it to her back when we started dating, and it soon became her favorite movie. The first scene was so iconic to us. It was ironic too, you know, considering we'd just changed the locks during the prior week. Eventually, the movie wrapped up with the iconic twist as darkness showed from all of our windows. The power was still out. Candles glowed in dim clusters. We called it an early night. But I couldn't let it be. I kept replaying the way people talked about Curtis. I kept seeing the camera in my hand. I told Julia I'd walk the perimeter and lock up. Instead, I found myself opening the envelope again, staring at the message inside until the ink blurred. I don't know why I told my wife it was a roofing ad. Maybe I wanted it to be. But when I unfolded the paper again, there weren't any coupons. Just one line scrawled in ink so heavy it bled through the page. I made my way to the front door, then I stepped outside. My motion sensor porch light staggered to life as I crossed the driveway. Across the yard, towards the fence, Curtis's lantern swung and threw lazy bands of light over the tall weeds in his yard. His screen door was hooked open. I called softly a couple times, "Curtis?" and heard nothing but the brittle echo of my voice. I tossed a stone at his porch steps. It bounced, nothing more. I turned to head back and froze. A sound crawled out of the dark, familiar and wrong. Stridulation, the dry rasp of crickets, but slower, deliberate, like someone trying to mimic their cadence. A soft croak rolled through the yard. In the half-light, a silhouette moved along the side of my garage, shoulders brushed briefly by the glow of Curtis's yard lanterns. "Dugan?" I said, squinting. The kid moved, like a puppet, along the wall, making that awful cricket call without speaking. It was enough to push me back. "Dugan, cut it out. This isn't funny. Go home or I'll..." His imitation stopped the moment my motion lamp snapped on. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the bulb, and then the chorus of insect noises swelling all around us. Then I saw them. Dozens of little white lights across the street, blinking in pairs, each attached to a shadowy silhouette in the ditch and under the trees. Grillidae Oval, our perfect neighborhood. The chirping went deafening as the motion light dimmed to conserve power. Junk, I thought. I heard the sound of an engine starting up. Then my neighbor's house lit up from the inside, his generator. Dugan lunged from the corner of my eye. He came at me with wet, ragged breaths, half cry, half growl, trying to bite, his teeth clacking against each other with each empty bite of his maw. I shoved him out of the grapple, and my boot connected with his chest. At that instant, there was a sharp metallic click, the sound of a gun being racked, and then a single, thunderous boom! Warm wetness splattered across my face and neck. Pause. I looked up and saw it. Dugan, or what used to be Dugan, his shoulder and half his neck blown away. Flesh twitching and writhing where bones should have been. Curtis fired again. The shot tore through his hip, spinning him down into the grass. And then it split. The Dugan thing's back opened like a zipper, straight from the scalp down past his collar. A membrane bulged, wet and glistening, sliding out from the bottom of his skull, pushing out through the muscles and tendons of his neck. 6 noodle-thin tentacles unfurled from his spine. The thing inside slithered free, using its appendages to fling through the grass toward the back of the house, before leaping into the bushes, leaving behind what was once my daughter's crush. Gunfire roared. I snapped my head up, trying to find a bearing on what was going on. Curtis was on his porch, shotgun booming in a steady rhythm, cutting down silhouettes charging from across the street. The air was filled with a symphony of insect noise, shrill and deafening. Then, Curtis flipped on his porch light. Not yellow, not white. A violet glow swept across his yard like a comb. Under it, the things froze, their forms jerking in confusion. Curtis reached to his porch posts, unhooking the hoops that held the lanterns. The nylon line snapped free, and the lanterns dropped, shattering against the stone pavers. The mini-explosions lit the yard like flashbangs. Fire bloomed in the thigh-high weeds, and 5 of our neighbors ignited at once, shrieking, flailing. I wanted to cheer. For one insane moment, I thought he might actually win. Just an old man, alone on his porch, holding off the entire neighborhood with fire and a shotgun. It was suicidal. It was impossible. And yet, for a heartbeat, I believed. But it didn't last. The gunfire, the insect drone, the flames, it all cut out at once. His porch light died. The generator sputtered into silence. In the red glow of burning weeds, I saw them swarming. Shapes skittering through my yard, shadows pouring up from Curtis's backyard, where the generator had been. Mr. Rain, the man who always bragged about his lawn, rushed Curtis. A shot cracked, and Rain's chest blew open, his ribs exploding out his back. Curtis reloaded with inhuman speed, a shell clamped between his fingers until something snagged him. A pale arm hooked his left shoulder and yanked. His arm tore out of the socket with a wet pop, twisting grotesquely behind him. Curtis didn't falter. Down to one knee, he slammed the butt of the shotgun onto his thigh, racked it one-handed, jammed his thumb against the trigger. The last shot went off, the same second Will lunged from the other side. The buckshot turned Will's head into a spray of cartilage and brain, but Will's momentum carried through. His open hand smacked Curtis across the face. When Curtis hit the ground, his head was rotated nearly 2/3 the wrong way. And just like that, the good neighbor was gone. Only moments passed before I realized every remaining pair of eyes were laser-focused on me. Some were in the street, some in yards, all of them frozen. I took a step back toward the porch. They stepped. I sped up. They matched my pace. I turned and bolted. The raspy, insectile chorus was joined by the thunder of feet, stomps on pavement, boots tearing through grass. I slammed the door and latched it. For a second there was nothing. Then the first heavy body hit wood with a gut-punch thud. I had to get Jules and the kids. I had to save them. But as I passed the island, I stopped. The envelope sat where I'd left it. This time the words landed. "Suffer not the parasite to breed. Burn its harvest." I understood. I understood too late. I flipped on every gas burner in the kitchen onto high, all 10, then pivoted. A dark crimson glow carried itself down the stairs, painting the house like an omen. Each entrance shuddered under pounding hands. But not a peep from my family. I hit the stairs, the slams from down the steps becoming a constant metallic drum. I burst into Jackson's room, empty. Gabby's room next, empty. The master. I threw the door wide and froze. Julia was not herself. Held down by a raspy, humming Gabby and Jackson. Her body was folded like paper in ways a human frame should not permit. Legs curled up and over her shoulders, feet planted at the sides of her head. Arms splayed and twitching, mouth gaping. Her eyes had rolled back. The sounds coming from her throat were wet, croaking. Not the scream I expected, but something that sank into my teeth. For a terrible moment, I watched the top of her skull seam and pull. The scalp puckered as if the backside just finished cinching back up. Her eyes rolled forward and met mine. A wet, gurgling hiss escaped her lips. Bone cracking and the sick sound of joints popping filled the room as her back uncurled. Creaking like a broken hinge, slowly swinging. I reached for the knob and slammed the door shut. Something inside slammed back too. Braced with my back against the door and my hands still on the knob, my heartbeat pitched upwards, a sharp anxiety filling my chest. Under the circumstances, it was absurd that I could control my breathing, but with the realization that my family had been ripped open and infected with those things, my motor functions began to fail me. Another slam against the door. The sound of wood splintering. I let go of the handle and broke for the steps. Before I got to the end of the hallway, Jackson burst through the door, crashing into the wall and correcting himself against the opposite one on the bounce back, shambling like a marionette toward me. Gabby followed, vibrations cooing from her throat, clutching at the warped wrist of her mother. For a moment, it was a collective, slow shuffle. But as soon as I took the final staggering shuffle to the stairs, the flip switched. Under the smell of gas, I bolted down the stairs, Jackson and Gabby pinballing off the walls behind me, their little feet drumming the hall. The backsliding door shattered as I rounded the corner railing, entering the kitchen. 10 bodies poured through the breach, sliding and lunging across broken glass, colliding with my family as they rounded the stairwell, railing after me. I collided with the corner wall that conjuncted our living room and the kitchen, rolling off of it with the slightest glance over to my pursuers as I tumbled backwards over our sofa in the dark. The bay windows in the living and dining rooms exploded inward. Light and silhouettes spilled through, pouring onto the floor. I scrambled on all fours toward the basement door. Out of the corner of my eye, a glow rose in the foyer. One of the neighbors was on fire, staggering across the porch, trailing flames like a torch. Another, its upper body already burning, leapt through the dining room window, the carpet blackening under its feet. Curtis's fire had been taking its time. Milliseconds later, I was yanking the basement door shut behind me, latching it and pressing my back to it, lungs burning like I'd sprinted across the county. I braced for the impact on the other side that would send me tumbling down the stairwell. Buzzing, darkness, panic. And then I realized they weren't following as hard as I thought. The ones at the front were more distraction than danger. The cellar door was solid oak, sturdy, but not unbreakable. A body slammed against it. At the same moment, something upstairs ignited. The roar of a flash fire rolled through the house. Screeching followed, feral and high-pitched, animals flailing in flame, sizzling, popping, then the screams, human screams. Heat pressed against the door. The thing outside stopped shoving. Its last push ended in a wet, sliding sound of meat cooking against the wood, slumping down the other side. I wasn't safe. The door was already glowing at the edges. I didn't know how many were still outside, but I had to get out. Fast. Before the fire spread downstairs. Before the air turned to nothing. I fumbled with the handrail and rushed into the dark basement, heart jackhammering through my pec. One of the small rectangular windows under the back deck was my only shot. I clawed at the latch, ripped at the cheap hinges. Screams upstairs bled into monstrous roars. Finally, the hinges gave out. Getting through was another nightmare. I dragged a foldable table beneath the window, climbed onto it, and shoved my left arm out first. Head pressed to my left shoulder. Right arm twisted behind me, across my back, fingers wrapping my left hip, trying to narrow myself enough to fit. I jumped, toes shoving off the wobbling table. It clattered out from under me as the deck above caught fire. Heat pressed down on my neck, giving the feeling that it was splitting, then a patch of darkness that I can't remember. No more than 5 seconds as if I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I clawed forward with one hand, legs splayed against the wall, whimpering as I thrashed. My fingers found a deck post, and I pulled. My right shoulder popped with the sickening crackle of styrofoam tearing. Pain slowed me, but I persisted until my right shoulder crammed through. Once my upper body crested through the frame, I flung my injured right arm ahead of me, and grabbing the post with both hands, dragged the rest of me out. Flames hissed overhead. Shapes stumbled onto the deck, their silhouettes warped by firelight. I crawled to the edge of the deck, keeping my head as low as possible beneath the inferno. Pushing through the shrubbery and into the cold night air, every instinct screamed for me to go back into the burning house, just for cover. Instead, I hugged the tree line, shambled to the shed. Moonlight turned everything silver, and I stayed in the shadows as scorched bodies wandered aimlessly around the house before succumbing to their damage. I crouched, spun the combination lock, and slid inside. The shed smelled like oil and old grass clippings. I latched the flimsy pin locks, knowing they'd stop nothing. Still, I pulled a tarp over myself and slunk behind the lawnmower, and that's where I've been for 9 hours, typing this. From time to time, I peek through the tiny window. No fire trucks ever came. Curtis's house and mine are gone, collapsed into blackened ash. But the bodies? The bodies are gone too. Not on their own. At 5 a.m., the neighbors who didn't burn came out from their hypnosis and walked home without saying a thing. Some without shoes, some without their spouses or children. Shortly after, 2 unmarked trucks pulled up. Men in coveralls packed the corpses, loaded them into the backs of the box trucks, and drove away. By 6, dumpsters arrived. A cleanup crew is still out there, scooping the scraps of our homes into steel bins. And 10 minutes ago, my phone buzzed. Bzzz. A job position you recently applied for has opened up again. Thank you for watching Nightmare Proof. If you enjoyed these stories, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to keep the nightmares alive. Have a story of your own? Send it in, and you may hear it here next time. Until then, sleep well if you can.